started was that last summer, after I had been on book tour for a couple of months and hadn't been able to, come up for air, I looked around and I noticed that there was like all these startups using or forming around the ideas in the book. And the original idea of the conference, before we got into all this art and activism and ideas, was really just to give these startups an opportunity to connect to each other and share their ideas. So really, this is where everything started. And it's also, I think, really critical to where everything is going. So when people ask me what's my vision for how RadicalxChange actually changes the world, I say that, we're going to form these communities, these entrepreneurial ventures based around RadicalxChange ideas that will actually be more efficient and productive than the rest of capitalism, and they'll gradually eat up capitalism around them. And so I think that, this community is really the core both of how we got here and of what is going to bring about the change we want to see in the world. So I'm really thrilled to see all the projects that were here yesterday that were so impressive, and to see which ones were the most popular with the audience, hopefully without too much hacking, despite the blockchain crowd that was here. So Nathan and Kelly, really looking forward to seeing who won. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nathan Chen.
And I'm Kelly Bianucci.
And we were part of the organizing team for ProjectxChange. So the projects that you saw yesterday are a reflection of the values, mechanisms, and bias for action that this community has. We're grateful for all 13 showcase participants that shared their vision with us yesterday. The process started a few months ago when we had over 40 applications apply to be a part of the showcase.
And of those 40, the 13 that you had the opportunity to engage with yesterday during lunch were selected because they embodied openness, egalitarianism, dignity, and social innovation. They also had made so much progress that we felt they were showing RadicalxChange ideas in a tangible form, which was really the whole point of ProjectxChange. So you got to pick the top 3 teams via quadratic voting. As far as we know, the first time quadratic voting was used in a conference setting like this. And to introduce project number 3, we'll bring up Will Middleton.
How y'all doing this morning? My name is Will Middleton. I'm here to introduce Buns, Sasha over here. Buns is a bartering economy that has transitioned into a data economy. They are from Toronto, Canada.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sasha. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to take a couple minutes of your time to walk you through kind of how this happened. So Buns started in 2016 as a bartering economy. And I want to kind of quantify how successful as far as barter goes this was. There's over 300,000 people that use Buns as an application. There's over 3 million items available on the application. Last year, we did over 1 million barter transactions completed. There's 40 million messages, 10 million searches, and over 40 million page views per month, so quite significant. But when you think about barter, there's a problem. Typically, we reference the classical economic issues associated with barter, so value disparity, medium of exchange, divisibility of goods. These are reasons why money was created. So the same issues became apparent in our own economy as we created and built Buns. So as we scaled towards 1 million transactions, we realized that we had started to almost engineer a problem whereby we needed a currency to solve our ability to scale. So bits are earned. Bits are the currency we created. Bits are an ERC-223. They live on the application as a centralized data point, but have you have the ability to move them to Ethereum mainnet. Bits are earned for data, attention, and contribution to the community. They can't be purchased. And they're used as a medium of exchange and solve that classical economics issue. So people use them really to transact and interact with each other. And I want to talk a bit about why we chose to have it such that people can only earn them. So really, in the current state of the internet, Web 2.0, data is really the currency of the web. And to kind of quantify this, $325 billion is spent on digital advertising just last year. So really, the throughput of value on the internet today is really data and reach. So how do we change the social contract? What is it that we need to do to kind of create a mechanism by which we can return the value derived from data and attention to its rightful owners, which are people? And I think that the way to look at some of the stuff that we often talk about is really around the lesson of Snapchat and ephemeral messaging and what we can learn from that, and asking the question around what is like the one thing that a platform, in this particular example, I use Facebook, can't copy. So, you know, we often looked at alternatives to social networks that were quite popular as a feature that could be, you know, could disrupt that and create a second platform like Snapchat where everyone could migrate over to that. But really quickly, we realized features are ubiquitous, and you know, everything now has almost ephemeral messaging in it, or video messaging that disappears. So really, features are ubiquitous and are actually not differentiators. And so something more deep is really where you can find a differentiation that can change the way we look at centralized platforms. So we kind of, we went through a bit about the data economy, how large it is today, how you can't buy our currency and that you can only earn it through the network. And so the way it works is actually 60%, we have this thing we call the 60% promise. 60% of the value when a business purchases our currency, so users can't purchase it, but businesses can at the moment. So 60% of the money that comes in from a business, so if they spend $10,000, what essentially that does is 60% of that money is put into treasury and releases currency into circulating supply. So essentially what that does is it takes the attention and data that businesses traditionally pay for, that massive $325 billion, and it puts the value in a liquid format into the people who contributed to that, their hands. So how people earn bits, so they earn it for their data, their attention, their contribution, and also selling things in the marketplace. I'm going to focus on one particular slide here. Really, it's one particular screen here. It's the last one. In the last excuse me. In the last 9 months alone, since we launched this currency, users have earned and spent over $1 million at local retail shops that accept our currency. So there's over 250 shops that accept bits today. So really what that is people having a liquid form of data-backed money that they can actually spend in the real world. And what really that means is that, like, this is not money that is part of the customer's existing wallet. This is not share of an existing wallet. This is a net new asset class that's fully liquid that we support so that people can actually use their data to purchase things in real life. And in the application today, people can buy, you can get a haircut. You can spend it at, different food locations. You can get tattoos. You can really do a number of things. So Bunch is really what we describe as a data economy, and we believe that what the sharing economy did to create liquidity for your cars and your homes, the data economy is going to do for people's attention and contributions to networks. So what are we working on that's really relevant to RadicalxChange? So we're actually about to launch something called Zones. Zones will allow you to use bits to kind of create this social community whereby you can actually charge people in bits as well to be members of that group. And what that does essentially solves a problem with social networks today, whereby people who grow and contribute to the data and growth of a network are not compensated for their work, nor are they allowed to monetize those social communities. So we've solved this problem, and that will be launching next month. We also take a lot of principles around attention economics, which is like you've earned bits for your attention on the platform, and now you're actually able to use bits to reach other people and have their attention on the platform. So kind of a two-way street. Your contribution in work. So as this is a social zone, and in that zone, there's a conversation happening, and this is a really popular post. People are able to kind of contribute to each other, but also the value derived from the total page views associated with that particular conversation result in income for that community and for that person. Commons, this is really a combination, our iterative kind of process of looking at how QV and RL can be used on what we describe as the commons. So when someone has a social zone, we're going to kind of make a simple example. I'm the head admin, and everyone in the zone who wants to participate in it pays 100 bits per month. which is equivalent of about $1. And so what ends up happening is let's say 50%, this is an arbitrary number, but 50% of the total monthly payment that everyone contributes for their membership goes into what we call the commons. And the commons is essentially a mechanism whereby we can actually bring people together around decision-making with money. And the community in this particular case, it's like a Toronto social group, and they're voting using quadratic voting mechanisms to decide as to whether or not this fund that is kind of associated with all the members of that community, how it's going to be used. So it really is money that is collective and only collective, and no one individual within a certain social group or community can execute or use that fund without collaborating with the other people in that community. And this is a version of like Harburger tax, and we call it rage quitting. So, a lot of times in the administrators of social groups put in quite a lot of work, and they needed an opportunity or ability to, again, it's a kind of a variation on some of the stuff that Glenn has kind of laid out. It really, what it does is gives you the ability to kind of exit your growth of your social community but at the same time be compensated for the work and kind of growth that you've created within the network. And really, like what I think I'd like to highlight is just really that people matter. I think a lot of times, essentially we give away back to users who are the rightful owners of the value 60% of the money that comes into our company. And we think that that's the future of how what good business will look like is respecting the relationship between people and businesses and bringing them closer. And we really care about our community. I think it maybe our ethos and kind of how we came to this place matters the most, which is, we came from this place where bartering transactions put nothing between people. That when you have a bartering transaction, we're not fundamentally at odds, because I'm just happy to give you what I have, and you're happy to give me and get rid of the thing that you don't want anymore. And we wanted to make sure that as we designed a money or a currency of some sort, in our particular case, data-backed currency bits, we wanted to make sure that we never got in the way of that relationship between people. And that as we monetize the platform, we give people the lion's share of the value. And our objective is by 2030 to ensure that 100% of the value goes directly to users. So thank you very much. And what we've done is we've created, if you do have Buns or you're going to download Buns, you can actually enter RadicalxChange into your wallet, and it'll provide you with an additional 5,000 bits, which is about $50. So you can use it in Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, Montreal today. And it will also be available in San Francisco, LA, New York, and Tokyo in the coming year. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Sasha. So next up, we have Civil, which is a community-owned journalism network coming from Brooklyn, New York. Please welcome Matthew Isles.
Hello. My name is Matthew Isles, and I'm the CEO at Civil. Everything we do at Civil, we believe in a free press, civil discourse, and public accountability. We believe in a community-owned and self-sovereign approach to developing new business models for journalism. And we aim to become the most trusted digital media platform on the planet while restoring trust and sustainability to the journalism industry worldwide. I want to start by framing the problem. Google and Facebook's data harvesting business model, which has been brought up a lot throughout the conference this weekend, dominates the global digital ad market, despite the fact that journalists are one of the largest contributors of value to these platforms in terms of the content that they produce and the audiences that they mass. And the way that Google and Facebook's ad model works, data harvesting model works, is it incentivizes fast and cheap content while devaluing journalism. And increasingly, we know, of course, governments are cracking down on some of these practices, but nevertheless, these companies are two of the biggest in the world. In terms of what the effects are, I could choose an array of metrics to show on this front, but 2,000 US journalists have already lost their jobs this year alone, both from sort of legacy news organizations, newspapers, but also from brands like Vox and Vice and BuzzFeed, who were supposed to show us what the 21st century of journalism looked like. And so it's clear that the news industry lacks a working business model, even though they are the ones who are creating this significant value for the platforms. And the last thing is the last metric I want to call out, a third of US communities currently lack any local news whatsoever. And this term, news deserts, has been used to describe this. And what it's doing effectively is starving society of the information it needs to be self-governed. And when regions or topics lack dedicated coverage, the public suffers, and the public are proven. There's many research papers that show that the powerful in areas where there are less journalists or no journalists are much more corrupt or unchecked. And this last metric I have to just point out comes from a report from Facebook. So Facebook learned through its research that after your friends, the most likely content that you are to engage with is local news. And so they said, oh, we have an idea. We'll go out and try to figure out how we can connect people with more of the local news in their communities. And then they put out this report. Hey, journalism industry, did you know that we can't even find local news in a third of the communities in the US? And the response from the journalism industry, as you can imagine, was, duh, you are the cause. So who am I? I studied journalism in college. I've always been passionate about journalism and its impact on society, and journalists are some of the most brave people I've ever met in my life. But I ended up spending my 20s focused on digital marketing and digital advertising and entrepreneurship. But it allowed me to really understand how Facebook and Google work from the bottom up. And I became increasingly concerned about how these centralized platforms and their data harvesting models were corrupting the industry. So we started to imagine what a decentralized media platform could look like and how we could design one explicitly for journalism while still providing a path for our young company to sustain itself as well. This is a smattering of some of the newsrooms who have already joined Civil. I'm going to talk about what Civil is, but it's already this community-driven approach that's given us a lot of lift and a lot of momentum. Rappler is in the Philippines, Transitions is out of Prague, Ansur is out of Argentina, El Intercambio is from Guatemala, Gotham Gazette in New York, Datadista in Spain. It's really been a tremendous thing to see that just us basically calling out the problems and seeking these solutions has already gathered more than 100 newsrooms to our cause. And we're also proud to have partners in Forbes, the Associated Press, and WordPress. So like I said, we aim to be the world's most trusted media platform. So what does that mean? Members of the public should be able to trust the information they find on Civil because the journalists who join Civil are continuously vetted by the community of both their peers, other journalists, as well as members of the public who have chosen to become voting members. And we are using something called a token curated registry and our Civil token to make this work. All Civil newsrooms, if you want to gain access to the platform, if you want to gain access to our growing suite of tools and ultimately the audience, you must sign a pledge to be ethical per a clear and comprehensive set of standards called the Civil Constitution, which we drafted with over 100 journalists, free speech experts from around the world. And the result, we believe, is a decentralized trust machine upon which we will now build our business models, allowing, hopefully, for the community to continue to trust the governance mechanisms involved, since they are, in fact, a part of it. Yes, I said token curated registry and tokens. We are using blockchain to do much of what we're talking about. But we've tried really hard and learned some hard lessons, frankly, about how powerful blockchain can be, but how confusing it can be as well. And that was actually part of the reason why we came here this weekend, was to see if we could experiment with some new ways of making blockchain and cryptocurrency more accessible. Why are we so drawn to blockchain as a tool? Because like I said, we believe in a community-owned, self-sovereign approach. We believe in 3 core principles when we build our products and build our community. It's to own your data. We aim to provide every journalist and citizen with universal identity and data sovereignty, and this notion we've begun to think of data leasing as opposed to data harvesting, both to us as well as to each other, and in fact, anybody else who would want to build on the decentralized trust machine. We want to make sure that you own your content. The Associated Press, which is one of the world's largest newswire services, they publish 3,000 photos every single day. Even they have told us that between 60 to 70% of their content is being pirated as of right now. So licensing is still, believe it or not, a huge issue in this industry, and people's content is being ripped off all the time, thus another way for them to make money being taken from them. And the last one is own the network. We're committed to this notion that to provide a radically more trustworthy platform experience, we need to include journalists and the people who support them within the underlying protocol itself. So this is Civil. You can visit us today. You can become a member today. You can start a newsroom today. Anyone can start a newsroom. You can be one person. You can be a large organization like the Associated Press. You just have to commit to our ethics and become bought into our system. We've even made a cartoon to make this understandable. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that when you join our community, when you own Civil tokens, you are literally have a voting share, a voting token within this community that can't be taken from you, and that is as powerful as if I have it, for example. So what did we do this weekend? So 2 weeks ago, we launched our decentralized trust machine. Like I said, that's live. You can go to our site and you can join us if you'd like. That's all about trust. That's setting down the trust layer for our platform. Now we're incredibly focused on building sustainability tools for this industry. So we came here this weekend to see if we could prove to ourselves and to all of you that crypto doesn't have to be that scary, and that peer-to-peer transactions might just lead us to an interesting future for supporting journalism. So if you stopped by our booth, you saw something like this, and you flashed in front of our computer, and we were able to send you $1 really quickly. The Gitcoin team and many folks in the community have helped to make these tools possible. And if you stopped by, you saw just how fast it was to get into this experience. We asked people to then contribute that $1 to the newsrooms on Civil. You could click each of these to understand a little bit more about them, add a message to it. And we wanted to see if we could kind of bring a little bit of a dynamic, interactive approach to supporting journalism. And so on the right, you see our leaderboard. The top 3 newsrooms here are receiving grants from us on behalf of the participants, so thank you. And everybody on this list is going to receive a small reward from us as well. On the right, you see the social feed, which we were interested to experiment with. In total, we had over 100 people stop by our booth. Roughly, I want to say 200 to 300 transactions still need to go through it, all seamlessly with people who had never, didn't have any crypto on their phone. So that was really exciting for us to see. We also even started to calculate what it could look like if we were exploring CLR potential here, which we're going to be publishing some of the results of that in a blog post later this week. All in all, where I think this is all going is we want to see if we can seamlessly allow you to show your appreciation. Just in the same way that if you retweet something or you like something or you share something, could that action literally also be allowing you to tip that journalist, whether they're across the room or across the world, in a way that's peer-to-peer, no transaction fees, or low, virtually no transaction fees. And what's interesting to us is not just the ability to microtip. We don't think microtipping is suddenly going to make journalists rich, but it does start to create signal. And data platforms, data media platforms need signal in order to monetize. And what we want to make sure of is that the value signal that we're creating here is a departure from the kind of clickbait signals that we see on Facebook, Google, and Twitter today. That we could say, what are the most valued pieces of content on Civil today as determined by the people? Journalists will take control back of their content, wherever it's shared or viewed, whether it's on their website, on social media, or someone else's website. Creators and publishers should be able to use our tools in blockchain to better enforce their licensing and syndication terms, and therefore be able to capture more of the value that they create. And ultimately, journalists and the people who support them deserve to capture the vast majority of the value that they create. So we intend to employ an inverted business model where we take a fraction of the overall money that flows through the system, as well as sitting on top of this decentralized governance system to ensure that the public can continue to trust that we're going to be a good actor. We think this could be a total departure and orthogonal approach to how Google and Facebook operate currently, and we're really excited to see if we can make it work. So like I mentioned, next week, we're growing to over 100 newsrooms. Our ambitious goal is 1,000 by the end of the year, but we need people like you, especially people like you in this community, to not only join us, to help inform how we should grow, but most importantly, to support independent journalism. So I hope you check us out at civil.co, and thank you very much.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Kevin Seagraves. I'm here to introduce the winners of this year's ProjectxChange. Gitcoin's mission is to grow open source, perhaps the newest and most important commons of the 21st century. So here to talk about their platform for sustainable open source funding are Kevin Owaki and Vivek Singh.
Hello, my name is Kevin, and this is my co-founder, Vivek. We are here to talk about open source software. Our mission at Gitcoin is to grow and sustain open source software. By open source, I mean that the source code has been released, there is royalty redistribution of the software, and that modifications of the software retain the original software license. So those are the sort of the rules of open source software that were launched in the 90s and has allowed open source to power the 21st century digital economy. How vast is the use of open source software? Nearly all applications that are built for profit or not are using open source software. There was a study that was done a few years ago that quantified the impact of open source software on our economy, and it said that about $400 billion per year in economic value is created by open source software. But there is a problem in that if you're this person that's actually creating this software, you don't have the ability to capture that value. And so if we look at the life cycle of a maintainer of open source, they'll start off with a community reaction when they release a new software package. Something like, this is pretty cool. Thank you so much for working on this. And as that software gets more and more adopted, the conversation becomes a little bit more, this is great and thank you for doing it, but can you make it do X that matches my use case? And then we think that the sort of like conversation continue to evolve, especially as more money and productivity is involved into an attitude of entitlement from the consumers of open source software. And when you've I think production is single-threaded, but consumption is multi-threaded, so you can feel like it's coming from all angles, and it results in burnout for maintainers. These people who are creating a lot of value are not capturing it, and they're quitting being maintainers of open source software. So how do we solve this problem, or how do we attempt to solve this problem? Gitcoin is, if you couldn't tell by the name, a blockchain forward platform. And we think that we're on the precipice of a sea change in how open source is funded, because all of the money that used to go to some back office on Wall Street in the new open source financial ecosystem is going to be deployed to open source. And so there's a fundamentally much more money that's available to be deployed to open source. And Gitcoin, from first principles, wants to solve this problem by solving the user to contributor to maintainer funnel in open source. So we think that probably everyone in the audience is using open source software, whether they know it or not, but very few of us have contributed, and probably even less than those who have contributed are actually maintainers of open source. So when we think about our product suite, we want to build tools that encourage users, consumers of open source software, to be producers of it. And once they're producers of it, we would love to have them be able to make a stable income and become maintainers of open source software. So we've got a couple different ways that we do that, but I'm going to hand it off to my co-founder, Vivek, who's going to talk about specifically what we did this weekend.
Thank you. Yeah, so really excited to talk about Gitcoin Grants, which is a crowdfund contribution platform that is based on EIP 1337 in the Ethereum space, which allows you to make subscription-based payments to open source projects in the space. And what we think is most interesting about this crowdfunding platform is it's used to collect donations, but also to serve as signal for larger funding bodies like the Ethereum Foundation, Consensus, and other philanthropists who want to see the Ethereum community succeed. So while the value of the actual contributions to open source by individuals is large in the first case, by using liberal radicalism as a matching function, you're able to use your dollars to direct much more money that is intended to grow the open source ecosystem. So talked a bit about how CLR is involved there. How it works is that it takes the sum of the square roots of any of those crowdfund contributions, and it applies a matching amount that that project deserves because of the number of contributions that were made. And just to visualize how this works a little bit more, you can see in this graph that even in the case of $275 going to one project, if 10 unique contributors contribute $27 apiece, a larger matching function is derived and paid out to that project because there is a larger group of people that have expressed interest and expressed with their dollars that they want to support that project. So we thought liberal radicalism was a great place to start our experimentation when it comes to getting more funding towards open source projects. So we launched a $25,000 round where we had a matching pool, and we assessed what the contributions of the community look like at the end of that round. And so today we have the results of that for everyone to see. And so you see that there were about 130 contributions that were made across 40 projects. The top project got 11 contributors worth $1,600 and received a $6,500 match. I'd like to direct the attention a bit towards the middle projects, Lodestar and Lighthouse. If you look at 5 and 6 side by side, you'll see that Lodestar received contributions totaling $368 from a broader base of contributors from 10 contributors. And Lighthouse received $647 from 6 contributors. And so even though Lodestar received less dollars from the community, they received it from a broader base, and they received a slightly larger match than Lighthouse. So that kind of shows what visually we were looking at on the last slide playing out in practice in our first round of CLR matching. So that was awesome. We wanted to continue from there, and trying to click to the next slide. I think we might have lost clickability here. Let's see. Cool. Yeah, what the next slide will show is that we've announced a second round of CLR matching. So we're at 50K in this second round that's been contributed, of which we've already received contributions that have gotten us 10K of that match has already been filled out. And we're excited to see more contributors to projects on Gitcoin grants and to continue the experimentation with liberal radicalism. Some of the projects in the next round include RadicalxChange, which is shown on the left here. So if you want to donate to the RadicalxChange cause, this is an opportunity to make your voice heard in that direction as we figure out how to direct that $50,000. And with that, we'll talk a bit about how we think these rounds continue. Obviously, we have $75,000 that have been contributed, but as we think about sustaining open source on a longer time horizon, there are interesting opportunities that we as Gitcoin want to bring forth to the RadicalxChange community. So I'll let Kevin talk about that.
Thanks, Vivek. I want to briefly bring us home by talking about a proposal that we've made in the Ethereum space to do block reward funding. So basically, there's an issuance in blockchains that pays miners that secure the network, and we also we think that the work that miners is doing is important, but also think that developers are creating a lot of value for the network. So have authored a proposal to do block reward funding on the Ethereum blockchain, and this would mean a 10% increase to the issuance on the Ethereum blockchain, which is the #2 blockchain in the world, which could fund $100 million per year, or 1,000 developers per year in a bear market like today's market. And so the net result would be that we have 1,000 developers per year entering the open source and Ethereum space and working on the commons instead of some private profit-driven company. Big problem is governance, and we're working with the community at RadicalxChange to model out how the governance of these funds should be administered. I want to leave you with 2 parting thoughts. The first is pretty broad. It's what would the world look like if open source is sustainable? I think that there would be less black swan events like the Heartbleed bug that made the entire internet insecure for several weeks, and it would also decrease time to market in all of our profit-driven enterprises if we could make open source sustainable. Last thought is that we have launched a non-fungible token, which is just basically like a digital collectible for participants in and attendees of the RadicalxChange. And if you scan that QR code, you will be able to claim that non-fungible token, that collectible, into your Ethereum wallet. And don't worry about grabbing it now. We'll tweet it out from our Twitter handle on Twitter. We're at Gitcoin. So thank you very much to the ProjectxChange organizers for having us, and we hope that we can work together to make open source sustainable. Peace.
All right, well, thank you to all 3 of those exciting teams and the 13 that came to Detroit and shared their great ideas and their great work with all of us this weekend. We've been dancing with so many great ideas and concepts over the past 3 days, and it's really easy to go home with a head and a notebook full of great ideas and get back into our day-to-day life, and they never leave our heads and our notebooks. And my ask to all of you is that we make these ideas come to life. And one really great, easy way to do that is by interacting with the teams that you got to meet here this weekend, and to go out to use their tools, to adopt them, to tell your friends about it, to spread the word. That's how these ideas start to come to life. So thank you again. Thank you to the ProjectxChange team, Will, Nathan, Matt, Mamie, who couldn't be here as well, Kevin, everyone who made this happen. Thank you, and we'll see you do it again next year.